In 1953, Chevrolet rolled out a new sports car with a name borrowed from the Navy, a flimsy fiberglass body, and just 300 built, hoping it would wow America. It flopped so hard that executives nearly axed it before its second year. But inside General Motors, engineers secretly plotted a technical revolution that would turn this underdog into a record-shattering legend, one wild fact at a time, each crazier than the last. So how did the world's most unlikely icon survive, and what is the true story behind every mind-blowing twist along the way? June 1953. Deep inside a General Motors factory in Flint, Michigan, the first run of Corvettes started to roll off the line. 300 cars, each painted polo white with a bright red interior, all powered by the same 150 horsepower Blue Flame straight-six engine and a 2-speed Power Glide automatic. Chevrolet had taken a Motorama show car and rushed it into production, hoping to give America its own answer to the flashy European sports cars. The result was a car that looked like a Hollywood starlet, but had the muscle of a chain-smoking librarian. The sales pitch was pure optimism. The reality was this: dealers struggled to move them. Buyers wanted performance, not just pretty fiberglass. That body, by the way, was a first for America. No steel, just hand-laid fiberglass panels that were lighter than most drivers' wallets after a trip to the gas station. If you bumped into something, you did not need a welder, just some resin, a patch, and a lot of patience. Early owners became accidental bodywork experts, learning that fixing a crack was as much a rite of passage as changing the oil. The car's lightness was supposed to mean speed, but with only 150 horses under the hood, the Corvette was more cruise night than drag strip. Even the name came with a story. Chevrolet's public relations chief, Myron Scott, borrowed it straight from the Navy. Corvette was the name for a nimble little warship, not a fish or a French dessert. The idea was to evoke speed and agility, even if the car itself was still figuring out how to live up to that reputation. The first Corvettes were so rare, they are now collector's gold, but back then they were showroom decorations with a price tag of $3,498 and dreams bigger than their engines. So America's sports car started life as a show queen with a sailor's name and a 6-cylinder heart. It was beautiful, but it could not outrun a Buick. The only thing more fragile than its fiberglass fenders was its reputation, at least for now. The next chapter would need more than just good looks and a catchy name. Fiberglass was supposed to be the Corvette's magic trick, but by 1954 it looked more like a disappearing act. Dealers had unsold cars gathering dust, and Chevy's accountants were probably pricing out fishing boats instead of sports cars. The engineers knew something drastic had to happen. Enter the small block V8, a 265 cubic inch shot of adrenaline that would finally give the Corvette a heartbeat worth bragging about. In 1955, the straight six was quietly shown the door, and suddenly the Corvette could actually outpace the family sedan. The new V8 weighed less than the old lump and packed up to 225 horsepower if you ordered the dual 4-barrel carbs. That's a 50% jump in muscle, and with the car's fiberglass body already slicing 20 to 30% off the weight of a steel equivalent, the numbers finally started to add up to fun. Power wasn't the only change. The V8 changed the entire personality of the Corvette. With a 0 to 60 time dropping to around 7.5 seconds, drivers could finally stop apologizing at stoplights. The exhaust note went from sewing machine to snarling hot rod, and for the first time, the Corvette started to sound as good as it looked. The press took notice. Road and Track called it a real contender, and suddenly the European imports had something to worry about besides rust. But the real genius wasn't just under the hood. That fiberglass body, as quirky as it was, let the Corvette pull off stunts no steel-bodied rival could match. If you dented a fender, you didn't need a hammer, just some resin, a patch, and maybe a prayer. The panels were so light that in theory you could bench press your own car. Sure, early hand layup methods meant fit and finish had the precision of a toddler's art project, but the weight savings were real. Fiberglass density cut pounds without sacrificing style, and every ounce saved meant more speed, or at the very least, more bragging rights at the drive-in. By 1955, the Corvette had gone from a sales punchline to a genuine sports car contender, and it was all thanks to a risky bet on oddball materials and a small block V8 with big ambitions. The stage was set for a new kind of American performance legend, and somewhere in the wings, a certain engineer named Zora Duntov was getting ready to rewrite the playbook, one burnout at a time. Zora Duntov didn't just walk into Chevrolet, he stormed in with a blueprint for speed and a stubborn streak that could outlast a Detroit winter. The engineers called him the father of the Corvette, but he was more like the mad scientist in the basement, wiring up lightning rods. By 1963, Zora had convinced the brass to let him turn the Corvette from a pretty cruiser into a genuine threat on the racetrack. He once said that if he had to name the one thing that made the Corvette survive, it was racing. That year, the world met the Stingray. Not just a new body, but a shape that looked like it could slice through traffic and maybe a few egos without slowing down. The split rear window, designed by Bill Mitchell, was pure drama. A one-year-only experiment that sparked more arguments than a Thanksgiving dinner. Some owners loved the look, others hated trying to see out the back. Either way, it became an instant icon. Chevy built 21,513 of these 1963 split-window coupes, and every single one still starts a debate at car shows. The design traced its lineage to the Mako shark concept, but the real bite came from what lurked beneath. Under that fiberglass skin, Zora's team unleashed a revolution in handling. Out went the old solid axle, in came independent rear suspension, a leap so big it was like swapping roller skates for a pair of high-end running shoes. Suddenly, the Corvette didn't just go fast in a straight line, it could carve corners with the best from Europe. The new chassis, paired with a 327 cubic inch V8 that ranged from 250 to 360 horsepower, meant the Stingray was finally living up to its warship name. Drivers who thought Corvettes were just for boulevard cruising got a wake-up call the first time they tried to keep up with Zora's creation on a twisty road. The excitement wasn't just in the showroom. Zora had bigger plans, factory options, and secret projects that would push the Corvette even further into racing territory. The split-window Stingray was just the start. The real rebellion was about to begin, and Zora was at the wheel, grinning like a man who knew he was about to break every rule in the book. In 1963, Chevrolet quietly slipped a new code onto the Corvette order sheet, ZL6. To most buyers, it looked like alphabet soup, but to racers, it was a secret handshake. The ZL6 package was not just a badge, it was a factory cheat code. For an extra $1,818, you got heavy-duty brakes, a hot-rodded suspension, a massive 36-gallon fuel tank, and a limited slip differential. All the hardware you would need if you planned on spending more time at Sebring than at Sunday car shows. The only thing missing was a map to the nearest racetrack. Zora Duntov, the mad scientist behind the Corvette's transformation, had a knack for bending the rules without snapping them. Officially, General Motors was under a ban from the Automobile Manufacturers Association. No factory racing, no official support, just a lot of corporate hand-wringing. But Zora found loopholes big enough to drive a split-window coupe through. He funneled money into engineering studies that just happened to produce race-ready parts. If the suits asked, it was all for research. If the drivers asked, it was all for glory. But Zora was not satisfied with just offering a hot-rodded option. He wanted to take on the world. Ferrari, Shelby, anyone who thought Americans could not build a proper race car. So, in late 1962, he cooked up something wild, the Grand Sport. 5 ultra-lightweight Corvettes, stripped to the bones and stuffed with experimental engines, rolled out of a back corner of the shop. Official paperwork called them lightweight studies. Off the record, they were Zora's secret weapons. Each car weighed around 1,800 pounds, about as much as a well-fed Miata, and packed serious firepower. The plan was to sneak them into international races and embarrass the Europeans on their own turf. Of course, when the higher-ups caught wind, they nearly blew a gasket. The FIA, the international racing body, was not thrilled either. 5 cars were not enough to qualify as a production model, and the whole project smelled like a backroom deal. General Motors Board ordered the Grand Sports destroyed. Zora, never one to waste good machinery, hid them away and quietly handed them off to private teams. Drivers like Dick Thompson and John Mecom got their hands on the cars, and suddenly, Corvettes were winning races they were not even supposed to enter. Today, those 5 Grand Sports are the stuff of legend. 2 survive as roadsters, 3 as coupes, and everyone is worth more than most people's retirement plans. The original Z06s set the template for every factory performance package that followed, right up to the modern day. Zora's Underground Racing Club did not just bend the rules, it rewrote them, one secret prototype at a time. And for Corvette fans, that is the kind of rebellion worth celebrating. Chevrolet's horsepower shenanigans hit their peak with the L88. On paper, the L88 was just another big block option, 427 cubic inches, advertised at 430 horsepower. But that number was about as honest as a used car salesman's handshake. Dealers knew the truth, but you had to ask the right questions in a hushed tone, maybe after hours when the showroom was quiet and the insurance agents were nowhere in sight. Under the hood, the L88 was a race engine in a Sunday suit. High compression pistons, aluminum heads, and a camshaft that sounded like it was chewing gravel. The factory told buyers to run on 103-octane gas. Good luck finding that at your neighborhood pump. Most L88s left the lot with warning stickers that basically said that if you drive this on the street, you are on your own. Officially, the L88 was rated at 430 horsepower, but dyno sheets from Hemmings and auction logs tell a different story. Real L88s have been tested at over 550 horsepower, and some builds push well past that. One Gooding & Combing auction car dynoed at a number so high, it probably voided the warranty just by existing. Only 216 L88 Corvettes were built between 1967 and 1969, making them rarer than a polite internet comment section. Today, these cars command millions at auction, assuming you can find someone willing to part with one. Auction specialists have been known to break into a sweat just reading the reserve price. If the L88 was a wolf in wolf's clothing, the ZL1 was a unicorn with a nitrous habit. The ZL1 took the L88's 427 cubic inches and swapped iron for aluminum, shaving weight, and ramping up the insanity. Chevy only built about 50 ZL1 Corvettes, and most ended up on racetracks or in the hands of collectors with a need for speed and a disregard for tire budgets. Officially, the ZL1 wore the same 430 horsepower badge, but real-world dynos and racetrack results hint at 600 horsepower or more. Some modern tests have seen these engines, still looking stock, cranking out over 1,000 horsepower in drag racing trim. That is not a typo. That is a factory option that could outrun your neighbor's entire garage. The L88 and ZL1 weren't just fast, they were a masterclass in corporate misdirection. Chevrolet's engineers built race cars, slapped on low numbers to keep the lawyers and insurance companies calm, and quietly pointed the right buyers toward the order sheet. The result is a pair of Corvettes so wild, even the factory was scared to tell the whole truth. Forget the advertised specs, these cars rewrote the rules 1/4 mile at a time. And if you ever get the chance to drive one, bring earplugs, a thick wallet, and maybe a priest. At 5:39 a.m. on February 12, 2014, Security cameras inside the National Corvette Museum caught the kind of disaster that usually only happens in cartoons. The floor of the Sky Dome rumbled, then collapsed, and 8 priceless Corvettes disappeared into a freshly opened sinkhole. The footage went viral before anyone could even finish their coffee. Among the casualties was a one-of-a-kind ZR1 Spider, the millionth Corvette, and a black 1962 that looked like it had just won a beauty pageant. In less than a minute, decades of history took a surprise vacation, straight to the center of the earth. The museum's curator, still sounding stunned years later, summed it up best. "It was beyond imagination. We thought the cars were safe." Geologists had warned about the cave system under Bowling Green, but nobody expected the ground to swallow a whole Corvette collection. The rescue operation became a triage of heartbreak and hope, with staff prioritizing the rarest survivors. The first car pulled out was a battered C4, because even in disaster, practicality wins. Some cars were restored to their former glory, others left as crumpled reminders that even legends can have bad days. For months, visitors lined up to gawk at the gaping hole, like a real-life episode of Extreme Makeover, Catastrophe Edition. Not to be outdone by Mother Nature, Chevrolet decided to cause its own kind of earthquake. In 2020, the Corvette C8 rolled out with the engine behind the seats, something purists swore would never happen. The mid-engine layout flipped the car's weight balance to a wild 40 to 60 rear bias, putting it in the same league as Ferraris and Lamborghinis. The internet exploded with opinions faster than a supercharger spools. Some fans called it genius, others called it betrayal. One engineer speaking off the record joked that the prototype budget meetings were just civilized food fights. The reality was pure performance. The C8's launch control turned every stoplight into a drag strip, with 0 to 60 miles per hour times dropping below 3 seconds. The drivetrain swap meant better traction, sharper handling, and a whole new attitude. But for some diehards, the mid-engine move felt like the Corvette had cheated on its own legacy. Forums filled with debates, memes, and the occasional all-caps rant about real Corvettes. In the end, the Corvette proved it could survive anything: sinkholes, internet outrage, and even its own reinvention. The only thing more unpredictable than the ground under Bowling Green is the next chapter in Corvette's wild story. By the mid-1970s, the Corvette was dodging extinction like a cat with 9 lives and a nicotine habit. The oil embargo hit, gas prices soared, and suddenly horsepower was a dirty word. New emissions laws smothered performance, and General Motors accountants started whispering about cutting costs, and maybe even cutting the Corvette loose. Rumors flew through the halls. Could America's sports car actually get the axe? If you were a Corvette engineer, you probably slept with one eye open and your resume half written. The numbers were not pretty. In 1969, Corvette sales topped 53,000. By 1970, that number nosedived to just over 17,000. Strikes, new regulations, and the death of the big block engine lineup left the car gasping for air. The fabled LS7 engine, hyped in glossy brochures, never made it past the prototype stage. Instead, compression ratios dropped, power ratings shrank, and the once mighty V8 engines were tamed for unleaded fuel. The 1975 Corvette limped out with just 165 horsepower, less than a modern minivan. Somewhere, Zora Arcus Duntov probably groaned loud enough to rattle the glass in Detroit. Yet, even as the boardroom buzzed with talk of cost-cutting, the Corvette found a way to hang on. The car's image as a pace-setter kept it in the public eye, literally. In 1978, the Corvette was tapped as the official Indy 500 pace car, a role it would fill 18 times and counting. Chevy cranked out over 6,500 black and silver replicas for eager collectors, selling out faster than disco records in a fire sale. The sight of a Corvette leading the pack at Indy reminded everyone that even if the engines were wheezing, the legend still had lungs. While other muscle cars vanished or turned into shadows of their former selves, the Corvette survived by clinging to celebrity status and just enough attitude to keep fans loyal. It was not fast, it was not loud, but it was still a Corvette, and that was enough to buy it time until the next reinvention. Like a cockroach in a nuclear test, the Corvette refused to go quietly. In 1981, the Corvette packed up its tools and moved house, from the aging St. Louis factory to a brand new plant in Bowling Green, Kentucky. For the first time, the Corvette had a home built just for it. Workers traded the old noisy assembly lines for a facility where each car got the kind of attention usually reserved for show ponies and neurosurgery patients. Veteran line workers still joke about the difference. In St. Louis, you built a car. In Bowling Green, you crafted a Corvette. That pride ran deep. Some employees even signed their names under the carpets or inside the door panels, hoping their handiwork would last longer than a set of rear tires. The move did not just change the address, it changed the whole culture. Quality checks became an obsession. Stories from the line talk about managers stopping the belt to fix a crooked badge or a misaligned seam, even if it meant missing lunch. The new plant let Chevy experiment with tighter tolerances and better materials, and suddenly the Corvette's fit and finish stopped being a punchline at car shows. Owners started bragging about panel gaps instead of hiding them with racing stripes. But the real fireworks were happening under the hood. Back in 1957, Chevy engineers pulled off a magic trick with the ramjet fuel injection system. The 283 cubic inch V8 produced 283 horsepower, a perfect 1-to-1 ratio that was basically the automotive equivalent of bench pressing your own body weight. Fuel injection was not just for bragging rights, it made the Corvette faster, more responsive, and a whole lot more fun for anyone who liked their right foot to do the talking. The ramjet was so ahead of its time that other manufacturers spent years playing catch-up, and the phrase, "Fuel vet" still makes collectors' wallets twitch. Bowling Green's fresh start, combined with a legacy of innovation like the ramjet, set the stage for the Corvette's next act. With a dedicated workforce and a taste for engineering firsts, the car was ready to leap into a new era, one where survival meant constant reinvention, not just hanging on. By the early 1980s, the Corvette was limping through a midlife crisis that made disco look dignified. But then, 1984 arrived, and with it, the C4. Forget chrome and shag carpet, this was a spaceship on 4 wheels. The C4 came loaded with a digital dashboard that looked like it belonged in a fighter jet, not a Chevy. Speed, RPM, and fuel, all glowing in neon green and orange. For the first time, drivers could pretend they were launching the space shuttle every time they started the car. Underneath, the C4's new chassis was stiff enough to make the old models feel like pool noodles. Corvette engineers boasted about its torsional rigidity, and for good reason. The car could finally corner without flexing like a yoga instructor. But the real revolution was still warming up. In 1997, the C5 rolled out with the LS1 engine, a 5.7-liter V8 that did not just raise eyebrows, it raised the bar for every sports car in its price range. The LS1 pumped out 345 horsepower, and suddenly, the Corvette could run with the world's best, all while being as reliable as your grandma's toaster. Owners discovered you could drive an LS-powered Corvette across the country, stop at a drag strip, run a 12-second quarter mile, and then grab groceries without breaking a sweat or a timing chain. The C5's backbone chassis made the car stiffer, lighter, and more precise, and the engineers behind it became overnight legends in the enthusiast world. Then came the C6, and with it, the Z06, a track weapon straight from the factory. In 2006, the Z06 arrived with a 7-liter LS7 V8 making 505 horsepower. That is right, a naturally aspirated engine with more displacement than some people's apartments. The Z06 could lap a racetrack faster than cars costing twice as much, and it did it with a manual transmission, a steel frame, and the kind of exhaust note that made grown adults giggle. Suddenly, the Corvette was back on magazine covers, embarrassing Europe's finest and filling dealerships with buyers who wanted supercar speed without the supercar snobbery. The C4's digital dash, the C5's bulletproof LS, and the C6Z06's raw track power each proved the Corvette was not just surviving. It was plotting a comeback, one high-tech leap at a time. The market took notice, and so did the auction houses. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the action, and the Corvette's cultural stock was about to go through the roof. A Corvette auction is not for the faint of wallet or the faint of heart. When a rare model rolls across the block at Barrett-Jackson or Gooding and Company, you can almost hear the sound of checkbooks snapping open from 3 states away. In 2023, the original 1953 Corvette with VIN number 001 resurfaced after decades in hiding, and collectors started sweating like they'd just seen a scratch on the paint. Rumor has it that car could command a price tag north of $6 million, enough to buy a fleet of Ferraris and still have change for a used Camaro. But that's just the appetizer. Split-window Stingrays, L88s, ZL1S, and the Unicorn Grand Sports have all sent auction crowds into a frenzy. The record for a Corvette at auction? Around $6 million for a 1967 L88, a car so rare, even the auctioneer had to double-check the paperwork. The bidding doesn't sound like numbers, it's more like a high-stakes drum solo. One auctioneer famously joked, "Do I hear a bid higher than your mortgage? How about your neighbor's mortgage?" And it's not just the classics. Even modern ZR1S and special editions are fetching sums that would make a hedge fund manager blush. For some buyers, it's not about horsepower or handling, it's about owning a piece of American mythology, with a VIN to prove it. The Corvette's auction prices aren't just a number on a screen. They're a loud, gavel-banging reminder that, in the world of collector cars, rarity and history are worth their weight in gold, or at least a couple of beachfront condos. Every Corvette owner eventually faces a fork in the road, keep it stock, or start wrenching until the neighbors file noise complaints. The aftermarket world for Corvettes is less of a cottage industry and more of a full-blown arms race. Some shops will bolt a turbo onto an LS engine and call it a day. Others will build you a street car with 4 digits of horsepower, enough to scare your insurance agent and your chiropractor. There are C6 and C7 Corvettes prowling the highways with 1,200 horsepower, running quarter miles in the 9s, and still making it home in time for dinner. One Texas shop owner joked that they do not build Corvettes, they build time machines, except they only go forward. It is not just about what is under the hood. Corvette fans are obsessed with shaving off ounces like they are prepping for a weigh-in. Carbon fiber has become the new gold standard. Hoods, roofs, even brake rotors. The C6Z06 was the first production Corvette with a carbon fiber front fender, and by the time the C7ZR1 came out, you could order enough carbon to make a mountain biker jealous. Carbon ceramic brakes, borrowed from the world's most expensive supercars, became an option on late model Z cars. They can stop a 200 miles per hour missile in less space than it takes to say, "I voided my warranty." Restoration shops have turned into mad scientist labs, with owners swapping stories about turbo kits gone wild and carbon panels so light they threaten to float away. The Corvette's reputation for customization is so strong, even the factory has joined the party, offering superchargers, track packages, and carbon bits straight from Bowling Green. If there is a performance record out there, odds are someone with a Corvette and a questionable sense of self-preservation is already plotting to break it. The horsepower wars didn't just escalate, they went thermonuclear. In 2009, Chevrolet dropped the C6ZR1 like a performance bomb. Under the hood, the LS9, a 6.2-liter supercharged V8, cranked out 638 horsepower. That's not just a big number, it's the kind of number that makes tire companies rub their hands together and insurance agents break into a cold sweat. Top speed, over 200 miles per hour, verified by GM's own spec sheet. The ZR1 could outrun Ferraris, Porsches, and probably a few small aircraft, all while wearing a Chevy badge and a price tag that made European brands choke on their espresso. But Chevrolet wasn't done. The C7 generation turned the dial even further, introducing the Z06 and eventually the ZR1 with an earth-shaking 755 horsepower from the supercharged LT5. That is, 755 horses, enough to tow a barn, or just vaporize a set of rear tires before you hit the end of the block. The C7 ZR1 didn't just break the 200 miles per hour barrier, it stomped on it, leaving a trail of carbon fiber and broken lap records in its wake. GM's own spec sheets confirmed the madness, and suddenly, Corvette was elbowing its way into the supercar club, demanding respect from brands that used to laugh it off. Of course, with great power comes great internet arguments. Corvette forums became digital battlegrounds, with purists insisting that too much tech and too many turbos were ruining the soul of America's sports car. One owner posted, "If I wanted a spaceship, I'd call Elon Musk, not Bowling Green." Another fired back, "If you're not breaking 200, you're just sightseeing." The divide runs deep. Some fans worship the raw, analog feel of the old days, while others want every last bit of horsepower, computers be damned. In the end, the only thing more powerful than a ZR1 is a Corvette fan's opinion, and neither one is slowing down anytime soon. Every new Corvette generation pushes boundaries, electrifying, downsizing, or rewriting the rules. As General Motors prepares an all-electric Corvette for 2025, the legend's future rides on balancing tradition with innovation. For fans and skeptics alike, the Corvette remains proof that American icons are not frozen in time. They evolve, sometimes wildly. The next insane fact might be built in your lifetime. What would you bet the future holds? Let me know in the comments below.